Ciao, bello, and welcome home to a podcast where you can put those growing pains away and pick up an ounce of relief. My name is Cambria. I am your host, your cultivation manager, nursery grower, and anything you need in the garden. On last week's episode of Lettuce Wraps, we topped our plants, which means they are working vigorously at their new growth, which means it's time for us to talk veg. On today's episode, we are going to be debating short versus long veg times. This is a conversational piece in any grow room. Let's get into it. This is Lettuce Wraps. Here, see? He's coming in for the episode. Look how good he is. He's a good boy. I love you. I love you. Okay, let's get into it. Which one is better? What produces more yield and what is going to give you the best results in your facilities? This question is very circumstantial. There's so many moving variables that play into the veg times that you have. We can start off by talking about what the veg times control. So when deciding how long your veg period is going to be, we are going to think about root zone. We're going to think about branches and canopy. If you want more established root zones, you might want to consider a longer veg because the roots will have more time to develop. And in turn, the branches are also going to grow more vigorously as well. But if you're working under a time crunch and have limited space in your facility, a short veg time might be the appropriate way to go. Veg is also going to play a huge role in your labor costs and how much time you're going to have or be willing to spend on manicuring the plants, such as defoliating and trellising. So at the end of the day, it's not really about how big your plants are getting, rather how predictable and manageable your crop is going to be. That being said, we're going to dive right into the benefits and cons of short-term veg times. Though it is super cost effective, you are going to have significantly less branches and you're going to have thinner canopies by nature. Your top colas are going to be the primary shoots in your canopy. When vegging your plants for a shorter period of time, you should expect fewer branches because obviously the veg time was shorter, therefore fewer branches and nodes have grown. When you are dealing with short veg time, you are also heavily relying on the stretch of that cultivar. That being said, let's debate short veg times. So a short veg to me would be, a week, maybe 3. This type of vegging is really good when you are growing in styles such as sea of green. Not only that, but if you have limited height in your grow rooms, and I'm specifically talking to my indoor growers right now, you might have to veg your plants for a shorter period of time, depending on the cultivars and the space that you have and how high you can raise your lights if that is an issue for you. If it's not, then just disregard what I said. Okay, so yield patterns. Short veg will also affect the yield per plant. So because you're not vegging for a long period of time, obviously there's going to be less flowering sites that are on your plant. Yes, it does mean a lower yield per plant, but over the course of the year per square foot of your facility, that's going to produce more because your turnover rates are going to be a lot quicker. I mean, if you're vegging a plant for a week or 3, obviously you're going to buy more time versus if you were vegging for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, some 12 weeks. You know what I mean? You can fit a whole almost other crop within that period of time. So it's just something to think about. Another thing that you're going to see is your uniformity and the bud sites on the stalks. Let's just say hypothetically you did not top your plant and now you are choosing to veg these plants for a short period of time. What's going to end up happening is your buds are going to be medium sized buds, and there's not going to be as many big nugs as if you veg for longer and topped your plant where all the tops could get the same amount of light. So it's something to consider as well. Probably one of my top benefits of a shorter veg time is it provides less room for pests to establish because you have higher turnover rates. So you are getting those rooms out, getting those full production cleans in there, and ultimately just not giving PM and things of that nature room to really settle, or at least as much room to settle as you would with longer period veg times. Short veg is also really handy if you have a vertical setup. So generally speaking, if you're vertically growing, you're going to have less space for the lights, right? So you really have to be careful with what cultivars you're choosing in terms of not choosing cultivars that are going to have a lot of stretch. And if you do, making sure your veg time is going to reflect that so your plants don't grow through the lights, because that has happened and it will continue to happen based on the veg times and the cultivars. So if you are growing vertically, short veg is probably going to be the way to go. Because my God, we do not want those fucking aphids to get comfortable. We don't want the fucking thrips, the fucking powdery mildew, all that stuff. The odds are in your favor with short veg. We'll say that. So why do growers opt for short veg times? In a business perspective and the cultivation manager side of me screams that short veg times are the way to go. You can pump out X amount of extra harvest essentially per year. It is less on your hydro bill, your electricity bill. You utilize less food, less labor. It's the way to go if your cultivars allow. Some plants hate a short veg in the same breath as some plants hate a long veg. So if you're dealing with cultivars that like that short veg, then you're good to go. Another factor to consider when you are choosing your veg time is the feed schedules. In your program, you would have to allot for that with your feeds as well. These plants are going to have smaller reservoirs within them, so you will need to take that into consideration with your irrigation program because they are going to drink and dry back a little bit faster. And they're going to be less forgiving, which also translates to running at lower ECs with your feeds. Growers also opt for short veg periods when they're looking for high grams per light per year. Plant count is another thing that is important to take into consideration because you are vegging your plants for shorter. Generally speaking, a higher plant count is always recommended because you got to make up those numbers somewhere. I mean, if you're only vegging for a short period of time, it only makes sense that you would add more plants in to make up for the branches that are not growing because they were not vegged for that long. So if you carry the two, it all makes sense. But it does get risky though, because on the other hand, you have lower windows for mistakes. So your plants are going to need that time to recover. Generally, these plants don't have the time that they need to recover from stresses like transplant shock or really hot ECs. Ooh, overpicking. Oh my God. That is going to translate into your flowering period. So it is something to consider because if you make too many mistakes and you can just see, oh, this mistake has costed me 10% of my yield, this mistake has costed me 5% of my yield. By the time, week 8 or week 10 comes and you're flowering, what is left of that yield, especially because it's already yielding less because it was veg less. Capiche? So these plants, any mistake is going to show up immediately. And because we're cutting the window of veg time for the branches and nodes to grow, we are relying heavily on that plant stretching. This is going to be very critical within the first to third week in flower. If your plants don't stretch, then you basically just lost your yield. So making sure that the light around that period and the feed is on point, along with the temperatures and all that other shit too. Everything should just always be dialed in. Light and feed during week 1 and 3 are super important when you're vegging for shorter periods of time. Let's talk about the roots as well. Your root zone is going to be less established, and the root system itself is just genuinely going to be smaller. And this, of course, turns into less of a nutrient buffer. So because these root systems are actually smaller, that means they're going to dry back faster and it's going to be needing more frequent feeds, along with higher risks of lockout, which is quite terrifying to new growers. So continue on watching. As a total, short veg crops are generally less forgiving. So know it. Back to the cultivars though, because they do play a huge role in this. If you are dealing with cultivars that have slower rooting times, or also they just grow slower, these are not going to be ideal genetics to put into your rooms and veg them for a little bit of time. I don't believe it's doing the cultivar justice because they need that extra time. And also, it's just not going to produce the output that you are looking for. And I'm assuming your output is, gaining the most yield of your plants, which is what it is for pretty much every grower I know. And I'm assuming that's why you're listening to my podcast. So, and this also blends in with training practices as well, because you are going to have less of a window to top your plants. Generally, they'll only be topped once, if at all, along with trellis. It might not need a trellis. It might not. It might need one trellis. If it's an exotic, maybe it might need two trellises. Don't get me wrong, though. I do have clients that ask me to put two trellises on, even though they veg for short periods of time. And you have the option of doing very light LST to get that light penetration into the canopy more for those side lateral branches. And lastly, short veg gives you less control on bud development. So it's almost like you kind of get what you get. The plant's gonna grow whatever it wants to grow. And if you're happy with that, then that's perfect. Now we're going to move on into the longer veg, which I have seen lots of success with as well. Just a disclaimer, I am riding on Switzerland right now, okay? There's not a better way. There's not like, oh, this one's better than the other. I believe that every growing style has a situation where it is best for. And I think that's what makes growing so beautiful too, because we all have a program that works for us. And I feel like when you are a real grower, when you're actually understanding the grow, you have all these tools. Short veg time is a tool. Long veg time is also a tool. And as a grower, you need to know when to implement what based on your environmentals, your parameters, and your cultivars. And so, my hopes with this podcast and in this episode and every other episode is for you to take something with you so that way you can make more informed decisions in your garden. The thing with growing with cannabis is until it works or you've killed your plant, you really don't know what's going to work. So, just to my grower boys out there, don't beat yourself up because you killed that plant. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but you are doing a great job regardless. Anyways, let's get into long veg times because we love a long veg too. To me, a long veg time would be a month, 2 months. Some people veg their plants for an insane amount of time. And that is also really great to see when it is an appropriate situation. Me, when I go into craft and commercial facilities, they're often running somewhere between a short and a medium veg period. Vegging the plants for over a month or two is just not practical for these facilities. The turnover rates are not high enough, and it makes them more susceptible to problems like PM, aphids, thrips, gnats. And of course, growing styles like Screen of Green love these long veg periods, and I'm going to tell you why. Plant structure and your canopy, you are going to be seeing really long, thick stems. There's going to be nothing but lateral fucking branching. I have had it where, you know, you vegged your plants for maybe a little bit too long and they just goddamn take over the whole canopy. Like once week two hits and they start growing and you're like, oh my God. So yeah, that's where the trellis really comes in handy, but we're going to get to that in a sec. The outputs of a long veg is going to look like hardy, heavy, dense nugs that are able to be supported on the branches. The tissue development and the cell development, everything was able to mature and strengthen, and you have more time to do proper training. You can do more HST style training. With this, you also won't have to rely so much on stretching to complete your canopy to make your numbers. Having a longer veg time is also going to help you shape your canopies. If you're like me and you like uniformity, this is totally a good way to go. You can top your plants as many times as you want. I mean, over 2 times, is it overkill? I mean, but it also depends on cultivar, but generally speaking, like, we were talking about topping last period. And then also with topping. Oh, no, we're not talking about topping. Sorry, I almost just started talking. Anyways, so you top once or twice. What does that mean? That means that you are going to have more top colas, okay? Because it's not going to have that huge dominant meristem that's going to tower over all the lateral branches. That's what makes those buds all smaller because it doesn't get the light penetration that it needs. So when you top the canopy and you veg for longer, you are going to be getting more main colas, and that is why growers would top and then have a longer veg period of time. I've done this the majority of my cannabis career, and I really see the benefits of it. This is also good if you have less plant count because you can get away with having fewer plants because the branches are making up those numbers. So let's talk numbers with a higher veg. Unlike in short veg, you are going to get a higher gram per plant count. This is because it's obviously growing more branches. It does mean fewer harvests per year, but you are getting more grams per plant per harvest. So keep that in mind. If you've got cultivars that love a long veg time and you're not so worried about your turnover, then long veg is the way to go 100% because you are giving that plant the fullest potential in terms of time to number one, it has more time to recover from stresses. It has more time to establish its root zone and grow its branches. So, therefore, these are just hardier, sturdier plants overall. Longer veg also means more forgiving plants. So, if you do lock your plants, what have you, you have more time to correct that. So, the days lost can be made up essentially. So, longer veg does actually equal plant stability, so to speak. How does long veg times affect your feeding? Your feeding is going to change because your plants can handle higher ECs. They've got stronger, bigger nutrient reservoirs, so they can keep more nutrients in them. They can take more of a beating, so to speak. And that being said, these plants are costly and do eat more. Keep this in mind when making your nutrient strategy. Reflect your veg times. When it comes down to long veg, you are actually setting your plant structure before the flowering period takes place. This is what I really like about it because it does end up being more predictable when taking into account stretching and just the uniformity at the top of the canopy. What happens to that stretch is it's more focused on the space between the inner nodes versus growing that top main cola up right into the sky. But even a long veg has its cons. So let's start talking about that right now. If you have a facility that is infested with pests, it is going to be extremely difficult for you to maintain a long veg period and fight off infestations and bugs. This is why, again, the short veg is better for pest management and your IPM regimen. But if you have longer veg periods, I just really highly recommend staying on top of your pest regimen because this can get out of hand pretty quickly, as you know. You know what I'm saying? Another downside, you're going to have less turnover rates. As growers, we do not make money in veg. This is something to take into consideration. Our money is coming directly from our flowering plants. So if you are going to spend the extra money on hydro and labor and all of that in order to veg your plants longer, you need to take that into consideration. We should be logging if that is beneficial for more sustainability within your facility because the time loss has to amount to something in your crop. If you are a facility that is trying to save on labor costs, please take this into consideration as well. You'll be hiring for more frequent leaf picks because of the veg time. It is growing more leaves, it is growing more branches, and I doubt you want the schwap in your garden. So you'll have to pay someone, if not yourself, to take all that like larf out of there. Another downside to long veg is your canopy is just getting completely unmanageable. I have had this where I was working with a facility one time where we had over vegged these exotic plants and they were about to hit the lights. So, with the trellis, we had to extend these branches underneath the trellis and do a really hard train on them. And I am telling you, it looked so congested, so brutal. The stalks didn't even have proper room to grow the flowering sites. And it was just a disaster. Like, if you want to talk about the definition of anxiety, having an unmanaged canopy, that'll do. That'll do for me. And I love going into those facilities and doing like a Nanny McPhee kind of thing. But honestly, if you can avoid it, just do it because it's such a fucking headache. And it'll be a headache every single time because when you trellis over veg plants to bring them down in your canopy, you're now going to also be paying for extra labor costs when it comes down to harvest because they are going to be harder to harvest. Okay. We don't want to see floor buds all over the pots. So to take those plants out with ease is next to impossible. This is something that I think every one of the garden workers would love their bosses to know because it actually is the fucking shit. Okay. It's like the worst fucking thing ever. Another downside are the uncontrollable risks. So, power outages. If your AC goes down and your room ends up becoming like 105 degrees, for example, and you don't have your units hooked up to a Trollmaster unit or some way of regulating it and you're not there, that could be a devastation for your crop, especially because you've just paid like 6 to 8 weeks of workers, lights, all of that stuff. If your facility and setup is reliable, then that's a great thing. But if it's not so reliable, it could be a devastation if you choose to veg your plants longer and something goes wrong. So another thing is overhandling. With the defoliations, especially after day 21, if you do pick your plants after day 21, the manual labor can cause the hairs to burn, it can cause stress, broken branches, things of that nature. So now that we went over short and long veg times, where are you sitting on this scale with your facility? Please drop a comment down below because I would love to pick this conversation up in the comment section. So overall, what is my opinion? My opinion is it depends on the plants. It's always going to go back to the I consider myself as someone that advocates for the plants. And so I'm going to say this every time. It does depend on the plant. And it really heavily depends on your setup as well, what you're going to choose. I think better than giving you my opinion, I'm going to leave you with a couple questions to answer about your individual setup. Number 1, do you have a high risk of pest interference in your crops? If the answer is yes, a shorter veg time might benefit you greatly versus a longer veg time. Number 2, your clones. Are your clones consistent or are they taking a long time to root? If they are taking a long time to root, probably gonna be better off with the longer veg time. So that way, at least your roots will be able to establish once they get transplanted. Number 3, what do your plants want? So hypothetically, if you decide, you know what, I'm gonna do a short veg time, but you look at your plants after vegging for 3 weeks and you're like, well, these are very, very small still, and they do not have branches or they're not quite established in their pot yet. They're not taking to the soil. They're not eating or drinking properly yet. They haven't caught on. Yeah, you're going to want to listen to your plant and see that this plant is not going to produce what you want because of the vigor or whatever the case may be. And number 4, what is your labor cost budget? Okay, because we all have one and we might not listen to it, but we should have one. What is the out of pocket that you can afford to pay for labor? This for sustainability purposes is really going to save your ass because you don't want to be overpaying for labor when you can't afford it. And on the topic of labor costs, when it comes to both veg times do have their own set of costs. For example, longer veg times, you're going to be spending more on deleafing and trellising, cleaning, watering, all that stuff. But with shorter veg times, you're going to be paying more for trimming, harvesting, transplanting, and cloning. Because your turnover rate is so high, you're going to need to have clones constantly coming in and coming in. But the argument still stands because facilities get paid grams per year, not really grams per plant. So the question still stands. I'm going to leave it on the table and I'm going to let the viewers decide on what they prefer, whether it is a short veg period or a long veg period. Man, this episode was really fun to film. I am so happy to be delivering this podcast to you and have you still be watching. So if you are still watching, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And again, I'm just going to put a little disclaimer in here. Anything you hear in my podcast is simply meant to be a guide. I can't simply pinpoint every issue that you have in your garden without being there or physically seeing it or even pictures or videos. So, I mean, even with pictures and videos, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. However, I would love to chat with you via consultation. So send me a direct message if you have any further questions about your facility and you would like a second opinion. Well, Bello, that is going to be a wrap for this week, and I need to take this minute to thank you for watching the second episode. Next week, we are going to dip our toes into propagation and all the trials and tribulations that come along with that. I appreciate your support so much, and I look forward to taking this conversation to my other platforms. You can connect with me on Instagram at lettuce wraps, or oh, you can connect with me on Instagram at lettuce wraps with 3 T's or Lilith and Lettuce. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to show me some love and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Anyways, until next week, arrivederci.